All right, we are live now. We're waiting for more folks to join as folks get in. All right, welcome everyone. We're just hanging on here for a few minutes before we start, so everyone is able to join. We've got our panelists here have joined. I think we've got everyone in. Claire has just gotten in. Good to see you, Claire. There you go. All right. We're just hanging tight here until everyone is finished joining. Got more folks rolling in. Lots of familiar faces here, or familiar names. Great to see everyone. Come on in, make yourself comfortable, sit anywhere you like. And we'll get started in just a few minutes. Great to see our panelists here. Really interested. We've had an amazing day so far, and all the learning. My mind is even more open for learning after seeing such amazing, inspiring speakers talk today. We've got an amazing panel here of some leaders in this area, and we're very excited to hear what their thoughts are, reflecting on Agile after 20 years after the signing of the Agile Manifesto. We're going to hear some thoughts, in the context of our specific little corner of the world here. I think, folks, we still have some more folks rolling in. And so we'll get started in just a bit. All right. Okay. All right. I think we can go ahead and start. So who do we have here today? We have our panel. I'm sure you've seen them before. I'm sure you are all familiar. I'll just introduce them and then hand you off to our facilitator. So joining our panel today, we have Claire Atwell, who I love your LinkedIn title here, Spreading the Joy of Agile.
Absolutely.
She's the Senior Director of the Agile Center of Excellence at Freddie Mac. Great to have you here. Thank you. Then we also have Josh Seckel, Government Enterprise Agilist with Deloitte. I've known Josh for a while. He's both seen the government side and the commercial side. He has worked at the USCIS, with immigration services, did a lot of very great Agile work there. Great to have you here today, Josh.
Thank you.
And then we have Melissa Rummel. She is the lead of Agile transformation lead at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, where we hear a lot of great stories about Agile transformation coming out. Great to have you here, Melissa. Thank you for joining.
Yep, thank you very much.
And then final panelist here, we have Richard Cheng, who's been in this area for as long as we can remember, was really a trailblazer when it came to Agile teams building together over at the Motley Fool. And he's got, still to this day, he tells great lessons from those teams that he learned. He's a certified Scrum trainer. He has really been a pillar of the community in supporting the Agile Alliance. Thank you for joining us today here, Richard.
Thanks for having me.
And here is our facilitator. I'm going to hand you over to him. He's the founder at Lightspeed, and we owe you a lot of thanks for Agile living and breathing in this area, and for a lot of the learning that we have all done in the past few years. Arlen, Bankston.
Thank you so much, Matthias. And welcome, everyone. We've got the Brain Trust here. As you see, I brought my halo along for the ride. I'm not in the DMV myself at the moment, rather in Atlanta. But we'll be having a little journey through some of the perhaps perspectives of what's happening in this area and what could be happening next. What are some of the challenges and hurdles and benefits that we've been facing? So welcome, everyone. And we're going to get some perspectives, both perhaps from the government side, public sector, and the private sector alike. From some of our experienced panelists here. Wanted to start with the question of currently, where is the DC, Maryland, Virginia area in its Agile adoption journey now? So you've seen over the years a lot of migration from maybe more, team level to scaling. You've seen migration to business agility, aside from just the direct thing. In your view and in your experiences, what are some of the interesting strides that have been made perhaps in the last few years? And perhaps kick it off with Claire. Claire, any thoughts from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things back when I was coaching more, I would travel to a lot of different areas. And what I've noticed about the DC metropolitan area is that really we have so many different flavors of needs for Agile. We have a lot of high availability, high security, Agile programs going on. And so I think that what I've learned from traveling to different areas and, being a lurker in meetups and things like that is that really we have a lot of diversity here in terms of the way that we tackle agility. So I would say that in terms of the journey, I think it's at least the most diverse area that I've experienced.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claire. Perhaps Richard, anything from your perspective? You've done a lot of training, been in consultancies, been a lot of different places. What have you seen?
Sure. So in 2011, I helped start a group called ADAPT, which is at the time was the Agile Defense Adoption Proponents Team. So it was a joint task force to help promote Agile in the government. So our first set of conferences were focused around concepts like, should we do Agile? Is Agile right for us? What is Agile? Agile explained. Those were the themes of the conferences in 2011. And you skip forward to today's world, those aren't the themes anymore, right? The themes are, integrating DevOps into our agility practices, how to structure Agile contracts, how to scale across the enterprise. And so we definitely have seen with our government clients, a movement away from just kind of trying to understand it to how do we do it better.
Indeed, beginning to expand it. Maybe we're beginning to pilot in some places, but now they're beginning to take the reins, actually make more substantial differences. What about you, Melissa? Anything to offer on this one?
Yeah, thank you. So my perspective is obviously from the federal government. And so, the USPTO, myself and my awesome boss have had the opportunity to meet with several federal organizations and their center of excellences or Agile shops. And I think the government as a whole is embracing Agile for its known benefits. And we obviously really enjoy collaborating with our federal partners as we, move together towards greater frequency of value delivery and becoming even better stewards of our budget. The USPTO is, I think, kind of as you alluded to in the beginning, we're on our project to product journey, which is very exciting. And I think one of the great things that we see in this area that Claire alluded to is our Agile coaches. So I know at least for me, I've got a great team behind me and they're able to get engaged in some of the DMV meetups and in thought leadership in the area, which is exciting to see.
Yeah, in this area and beyond just lately, right? With the perhaps one silver lining of the pandemic is we're getting really the brightest from all around. And I think you've seen this area perhaps be a bit of a hub for that even. It's been very interesting. Thanks so much, Melissa. What about you, Josh? Anything else that you've seen?
So let's see, going last, I have to say, well, everything else that everyone said. And the thing that I've at USCIS, when I first started there, we were doing safaris. We went to Motley Fool. We went to Blackboard. We went to other commercial companies that were doing Agile to learn what could happen to kind of drive forward. And now at this point in USCIS's journey, other people are coming to us. And I think that shift from well, there's this thing out there, we need to go figure out what it is, to we're embracing it, and at PTO they're doing the same, like getting out in front and not just, oh yeah, we're going to follow 5 or 10 years behind what commercial is doing, but we're going to be out in front. And when I look at today and USCIS turns on a feature to out in the field for a live interview for one person so that they can observe it, and then turns it off, and then a week later does that again after they've made fixes based on the feedback and the observations, is like, if I was thinking 5, 7 years ago, Like to do that in the federal government, be like, oh, but you have this problem and this problem and this problem and this problem, and it's like, no, that's just the way that we operate now. And that shift is in my opinion a great thing to see, and kind of we're I think we're beyond that. Hey, yeah, we've got these pilots and innovators, and we're getting the early majority and maybe even starting to get some of the late majority into, yeah, Agile really is the way to go.
Indeed, indeed. I remember we brought our Agile Leadership Academy, a bunch of executives to come visit at CIS, and we're to one of your little brown bags to other agencies, and they were quite impressed. Even a few years back, making great strides. Since you went last, I want you to go first on this one, Josh, and we'll play off of it. Taking the negative side, perhaps, what are some of the, you think, remaining hurdles, perhaps, that we've not yet overcome?
So I'm going to frame this as a hurdle, and it's not necessarily a bad thing as we get into the early and late majority, but there is in a lot of federal contracts coming out now, there's you must do safe, and getting out, helping people get to mindset, and helping people understand, yes, I'm going to do safe, and I'm going to do safe in a way that I will tailor and customize in the environment that I'm in. And it's not, I'm going to take this book and I'm going to inflict it upon you that is safe. And I'm not denigrating safe for, I'm just what I've seen in several contracts recently. So continuing, I think the hurdle is to have that continued evolution mindset instead of, oh, now we're all going to do Agile and here's the book. Replace what you used to have as your SDLC, use the Agile SDLC, and nothing else changes. And it's like, you're not quite there. I think earlier, was it Linda was saying, if I'm doing Agile the same way I did a year ago, I'm not doing Agile. And she was quoting someone else, but that, that kind of continuous evolution and learning process, I think, is going to be our biggest hurdle, at least in the federal government, where there is that tendency to, I want to codify and define things.
Yeah, and it's certainly not just the federal government. I think there are a lot more answers around, and perhaps this makes it easier for people not to ask so many questions. We had an interesting meetup with Jim Highsmith a few days ago where we heard the origin, and perhaps they had a lot more to figure out then. Now there are so many answers that perhaps makes it a bit harder. Claire, anything to sort of add on to that, hurdles that we're facing as a community you noticed?
I'll really echo and build on what Josh was saying and exactly what you're saying. There are too many answers. And I think instead of viewing this as a growth mindset, we're getting back to people wanting to follow a process rather than principles. And especially, at Freddie Mac, we really emphasize the principles rather than process, because when you go back to your principles, it's a lot easier for you to come up with novel approaches when needed, rather than falling back and breaking when the process isn't going exactly as you think. So the other thing that I'm seeing is the too many answers. We're almost diluting, also going back to the principles rather than process. I feel like a lot of things are being diluted in that there's a lot of language thrown around that perhaps people aren't really getting to the real meaning of what it is. And so too many answers is exactly what I'm seeing in that, Arlen, is that, not that it's always negative, but it's definitely a challenge right now.
Indeed. And kind of tying what you said to what Josh said, I think a lot of this perhaps has to do with if we are trying to codify things that we're almost by definition not adapting. We're saying follow a process rather than invent it. And it may be easier for people, but it's limiting. Richard, anything that from your perspective to add there?
Yeah, and I think both those points made were really good about kind of, the practices and the mindsets. And just to expand a bit on that, what we've seen is that you can kind of, Agile at the execution level or Scrum at the execution level, we kind of get how to do that, right? But what we've seen in a lot of organizations is that a lot of what we have in the organizations isn't natively aligned yet to maximize our agility. So what I'm still seeing is reporting structures where we're starting to look, where leadership is still looking at like number of hours spent, number of story points delivered, our velocity per sprint, stuff like that, which aren't really helpful business metrics. They might be, you could argue they might be helpful progression metrics, but they're certainly not helpful business metrics, right? I still see things where we have people spread across multiple teams. I still see a lot of teams, organizations where there's a lot of handoffs and dependencies that we would like to streamline. I still see a lot of contracts. I saw something not too long ago where the contract is being paid, a vendor is being paid by story points, and they're just little odds and ends that we want to align better to maximize our agility. One team was doing Scrum for the requirements team, Scrum for the design team, Scrum for the build team, Scrum for the test team. And so there's still a lot of kind of shifts organizationally that organizations need to go through. And I realize for a lot of these organizations, it can't happen overnight. But what we're seeing though on the plus side is that they are walking that journey, right? And it's not going to happen overnight for some of these larger, heavier organizations, but I like they're walking down that path.
Indeed, indeed. Implying a lot of what you were saying, Richard, a lack of fundamental cross-functionality, a lack of the idea that we have dependencies interwoven in organizations and we need to tie technology to the other areas. Melissa, I'm curious from your perspective, certainly the biggest hurdles, you can answer that in general as well, but do you see any particular, just maybe a pointed aspect to Richard's, the point he raised, do you see a portion of the organization, a function of the organization that maybe is not up to snuff yet, but is a particular hurdle to being as agile as possible at a larger level?
Yeah, I think a lot of what everyone has said has really resonated. And one of the things that I think is exciting about the USPTO's transformation right now is it's the entire organization, and we're going down a product path. So, we're not doing safe. We don't have a prescribed scaling framework. We are aligning to products. And so, we're trying to break down a lot of those silos, and this kind of gets to, in a roundabout way, to the challenge I'm going to bring up in terms of culture change. We did have very strong silos, and so the point of having a test team doing Scrum and a dev team doing Scrum, that was what we had, and where we're moving is breaking down that and having everyone think of themselves as just one product team. And so, I think one of the biggest hurdles that, I see is the culture change aspect. And I know that's, probably not surprising, but, organizations don't change, people do. And so it's really trying to get to the changing of people's hearts and minds that are actually doing the work and on the ground floor, and even, up at the leadership level, and helping people understand, that it's not just about the velocity points. It's really about the outcome that you're delivering to the customer, bringing them in closer, and with that greater engagement, having higher satisfaction. So it's definitely slow, especially, in the government sector. But we're really making quite a bit of progress, and you can see it incrementally, in small engagements and interactions. So it's a challenge, and we're all kind of, as the Agile delivery office, we're on the cutting edge of that, driving that change. So yeah.
Wonderful. Actually, let me just stick with you for a moment and play off of what you noted there. If it's a cultural change, what are some interesting things that you believe you've seen and done at USPTO as a leader to help encourage those cultural changes and had some success? And anything novel you'd offer up that you thought was interesting that you tried?
Yeah, we've actually launched a dojo. So we've launched an immersive learning center, and it stemmed from, the Agile delivery office, needing to help accelerate the culture change, and meet the needs of our customer in the organization at, a fast pace. And so it's been something we started back in July timeframe, and it has taken off like wildfire. I mean, we've already, we've been able to help more than 500 people, and more than 50 some teams using this immersive learning approach, and we're, through some surveys at the end of these immersive learning sessions, we can see that progressive increment. So we ask people, what did you know when you first started, and what do you know now? And so you can start to see, little by little, every person that you touch is learning a little bit more in what we're calling the new ways of working. And to Claire's point earlier, that's, really around the Agile principles. having to change, continuous learning, all of that good stuff.
And are these classic 6-week style dojos, both say for kicking off new teams and for introducing new subjects, that sort of classic approach?
Yeah, we've done a bit of a mashup. So we've taken some, fundamentals from industry like Target, and we've kind of mashed those with, the new way, the USPTO new ways of working. And so, yeah, right now it's a 6-week session. And we're able to handle, multiple teams at once, so waves of teams. But the vision is to continue to grow that and be a little bit more flexible. So, you might take on specific challenges that, might, be different time frames, so maybe 4 weeks versus 6 weeks, and try to get in and bring in more of the organization to kind of surround these teams and help them on their journey.
Indeed. More of a collaborative learning experience where people feel supported. Perhaps a similar question to you, Claire, from at Freddie. Anything interesting you've done that you felt has helped to overcome some of these big cultural hurdles perhaps you're introducing?
Yeah, so in terms of organization and culture, we have 3 pillars. We have our Agile Center of Excellence, which I lead. We have a technical pillar. And then we specifically have an organization and culture pillar that has gone full court press on. We now reward people differently. So what does your performance enablement look like? It's different now. It's based on your team, not just your individual. Are you helping the people around you? So that was one thing in particular that we did. In addition to that, we've instituted OKRs, which in terms of culture, you don't immediately say, what do OKRs have to do with culture? But really what it is every individual understands how they're contributing to the whole and to business value. So that's how we've really taken that shift from I'm updating Java libraries to I'm making the performance better on this application because that's what our customers want. So we've really created that traceability all the way down to the individual contributor for them to understand how they're furthering our business needs and really having that business focus. And just as Melissa said, we've also gone from now we're product-based, we're no longer project-based, so that we have those long-standing teams so that the teams really become cohesive and we bring the work to the team rather than having to break them up. And I feel, my previous experience was contracting with the government and we didn't have that capability because contracts would be re-competed and sometimes you wouldn't end up with the same people, or maybe part of the organization had the contract for requirements and another piece had the contract for the development piece, creating sort of that antagonistic relationship. So I feel really lucky at Freddie Mac that we're able to do that, where all of the development, soup to nuts requirements to deployments are really done as a team.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claire. I noted a question coming up in the chat here. When management still wants status, what is the recommended approach to shift toward agile approaches? I think you just began to share some ideas there, supporting people, changing the incentives basically at lower levels, performance management, and trying to make it more of a team game. Melissa, likewise, the dojos, the supportive group learning experience can help people feel more that they can get maybe accustomed to things, without being under the lens too much and under serious delivery pressures, and having that direct support. Maybe Richard, if you've done a lot with training and support. When you're thinking more from, and you would also know this before, maybe people use the wrong metrics. What do you think are some of the right things to measure, some of the right approaches to begin to drive cultures, to play off of that a bit?
Yeah, what I see a lot is we still see a lot, like I mentioned earlier, we still see a lot of metrics that are really, there's metrics we kind of got comfortable and used to, right? But they may not necessarily be as helpful. And so I think in terms of metrics, especially from a product standpoint, is identify this. I like to start off by saying, what are the product goals, right? What are goals for the product? What are goals for each release? What are the goals around our major milestones and capabilities? Once we can establish our goals, then we can identify, all right, so if these are the goals, what are the metrics we should look for that can identify if we're achieving our goals or not? So I like tying the goals, kind of like Claire's pointed out, the around outcomes and key results. If we're trying to achieve these things, how can we measure and track that we are indeed trying to achieve it, right? Anytime I collect metrics whatsoever, some common thoughts are, why are we collecting this? What are we going to do with it? And also what I want to do when collecting metrics is I want metrics that are that we can collect easily within the flow of work, What I want to try to avoid are metrics that are difficult to collect, where the team or whomever has to take out time outside of what they do day to day to gather and collect and reconcile the metrics. I think that becomes a bit challenging because, our days are busy and we're trying to spend the days delivering value, and we're spending extra time collecting metrics that aren't helpful. It's a waste of time.
Indeed. We've certainly seen a lot of migration of our clientele as well toward an embrace of things like OKRs, objectives and key results, outcome pyramids, classic styles like KPIs, product-based teams. A lot of this is shifting away from, if you will, inward-facing process metrics and more towards outcome-based metrics. Josh, from your perspective, anything you've seen there and right things to measure and, and also maybe turn the Agile adoption, give it a better North Star, a better way for management to consider what it needs to achieve?
So I had some answer for the other part.
Oh, you can offer the other part too.
I'm going to offer the other part for just a half a second. One of the because Claire, something that you said triggered in me. One of the things that we did at USCIS is we were deliberate about evaluating our contracts on how well they collaborated with the other contractors, even though there is a inherent. I mean, we had teams that were. We 4 contracts all doing development on the same program, but we evaluated them partly on how well they collaborated. And so that kind of helped to yes, we're all still in competition, but much more co-opetition and much more, you have to work together or you won't get additional work. So that was something that I thought was important at USCIS, that we were deliberate about that. And then we created some crazy awards. The Joseph Priestley Award was my favorite. If you want to go look up Joseph Priestley, he is a scientist. He basically everything that he did was disproven, and it was award for experimentation, not for successes, but for being willing to experiment and making those awards coming from the CIO and making them big and visible to help get that. Yeah, no, we really are serious about this. And then from the metrics perspective, we started poorly. At CIS. And the reason why I say that is not that we couldn't count story points and count the other stuff, but we didn't build it into the systems to actually pull out the business measurements that we needed because we weren't thinking them through at the beginning. And so we got, hey, we're delivering. And then we said, okay, great. What's the actual impact? And we went, we can't tell how long it takes. Yeah, because we didn't, I mean, we could go through and manipulate and do a bunch of data crunching and figure it out, but it wasn't just there. And so for me, one of the things on metrics is indeed to get those, which is why I love moving, and now I'm helping other organizations move to OKRs and do some of that, get some of those metrics up front so that they become user stories that you can actually put into your system, so you simply have them reported out, rather than something that you need to go and figure out and find later based on data that really has, that you're trying to manipulate. So that was something that we learned at CIS, I think was, yeah, let's look at what metrics we need to get out of the system at the end and make sure that we build them in addition to just the simple front end functionality and things.
Yeah, to Richard's point there, it needs to be something you can gather in the flow of work, not something out of band that's an additional effort. And you heard also the incentivization with the vendors there. That's very interesting. At a government level, you're doing much the same thing that we're seeing at Freddie Mac, let's say, at a more personal level, organizationally, trying to align our incentives to what we'd like to see behaviorally. I wanted to grab another one actually from the chat here. There was one early on about the government, the 800-pound gorilla, always in the room, and people in the DMV talk work, from what I understand. How does that influence everyone's belief in executing agility versus agility influencing the government? So in other words, I think it's saying, is the government more driving differences in agile methods here locally, or are agile methods driving differences in the culture of government? And if so, how have you seen that play out? Maybe Melissa, or actually, no, Josh, let's stick with you actually, because you were also the government, and we'll hop over to Melissa as well on that one.
Go ahead and start with Melissa. Sorry.
Okay. Go ahead, Melissa. And I promise no curveballs here as well.
I don't quite know how to answer that one. I think, my best guess at that, is, I think from a federal perspective, there is a concern with, the amount of money and the risk that some of these IT projects have at a larger scale. And so, it's almost to the point where, we don't have an option, of continuing what we were doing and having it not work. Obviously the DMV area has a huge federal footprint. And so, I think you would automatically just assume that as the government is transitioning to, Agile and DevSecOps and cloud, and now the product space, it's got to drive a lot of thought in the area. And I think you can see that in the events, in the meetups, in this conference. So I think, it's probably a back and forth, right? I think, we were at a point where we're taking input from industry best practices and trying to keep up. And I'm sure that, our journey is impacting, this area.
Indeed. Certainly, Josh noted things like CIS beginning to tell stories, and PTO beginning to tell stories as well to other organizations.
Yeah, though I will add one thing. Oh,
sorry, Melissa. I can see you speaking.
No, her video's on a bit of a delay. That's all.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I would add one thing to what Melissa said, which is not necessarily today, but like at the start of USCIS, we were having to teach way more contractors Agile than we should have. And now we're getting to much more of a partnership, and we're both growing, and I think in good ways. And honestly, like now, like Capital One is stealing people who are feds and who are feds or contractors for feds, and vice versa. And I think that is definitely been good for getting that growth and that acceleration across everything in the area. Indeed.
We've got a couple of other questions here to pose. One of them you've begun to offer up already, some ways to, if you will, help to uplift the community more generally in your respective positions, helping to share with other organizations and that sort of thing. Maybe shifting to the more personal level here, though. If you're thinking in your own personal journey, what is something that you've done in your career to really help evangelize Agile properly in some of the earlier years when you're trying to get over the hurdles, trying to get it into your organizations? Maybe Richard, start with you on this one.
Okay, great. Yeah, actually, I do have a quick story for that. So, and this is not so much me helping others, it's more actually others helping me. But years ago, about 10 years ago or so, I was working at the Motley Fool at the time, which was great. So if you guys went to Motley Fool, it's great. Like their game room, better than half the sports bars in town. There's free food everywhere. It was amazing. So I loved it there. But when I rolled off Motley Fool, I went to work at OPM. And at first it was kind of depressing because it's a big, great government building right there in the heart of DC. There's no food anywhere. And if you try to bring alcohol into the building, the security guards will stop you. So I was kind of, it was a little depressing at first. And also just, I feel like I was swimming upstream because, you're going from doing Agile at a kind of a startup-ish fun place where everyone gets it to a place where they're still not quite there yet. So at first I was kind of depressed, but then I started meeting people that were in the same space and we started commiserating together and we formed like a community inside. And once we formed that community, we like shared war stories and they kind of told me how they did things on their projects and how we did things on ours. So some people I met were people like Suzette Johnson over at Northrop Grumman and David Rico up in Baltimore and Dave Cheeseborough, who runs one of the associations. Another guy, Don Johnson, who was an executive at the DoD. So these are some of the folks I met early on in that same space. And they had great stories. And what I found was it was really great to like share this, the pain and the gains with other people in that same area. And we're all helping each other kind of learn and grow quickly together. And so I think just, reaching out to the community and finding other people in those environments and sharing and learning and growing together, that to me took it from something that I thought was a bit of a bummer to something where I thought this is a great growth opportunity for all of us, which I end up enjoying a lot. So just finding that community and commiserating and learning with each other, I thought was fantastic.
did you do that through any sort of a formal construct, a center of excellence or something internally, or just more of a meetup or more of a casual?
So what happened was we would run into each other at these different events. And I remember this explicitly, was great. So Scott Ambler was we're at a Agile and Defense conference. Scott Ambler was the keynote. He had a great line. I love this line. So this was during the heart of the WikiLeaks. If you remember WikiLeaks from a decade ago. So Ambler's up there and someone asked, about the slides. So Ambler says, well, the slides will be up on the DoD website in about 2 weeks, but they'll be up on WikiLeaks tomorrow. And I thought that half the room died laughing. The other half the room, dead silent, not even a smile, right? But we thought it was funny and back. The next person that spoke was up there talking, and it was nonsense. The person was spouting nonsense, story points per person, this and that and the other. And so myself, Suzette, Don, and so about 3 or 4 of us looked at each other and said, this is nonsense, right? We're like, yeah, this is complete garbage. This stuff like this is what destroys Agile. So at that time we said, it'd be great if someone would just form like a group that kind of helps promote that. And so that was the heart of the ADAPT group, was just that conference where we chatted and realized, we need to give guidance that's more pointed and focused along the kind of the right mindset. And so that's kind of what helped us start the ADAPT group years ago.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Richard. Over to you, Claire. Same question. What did you do in your early days to help evangelize and get over the hump?
So I think, what I always go back to is seeking to understand and staying curious. If you want to keep your frustration level down, just a personal tip, that's what I do is if you're feeling frustrated, just ask what's happening with people, what's happening with the organization, social wise, et cetera. And so I think early on, I worked in a classified space for most of my career. And I think early on, it was just seeking to understand what it was that would be a hurdle and just talking through it with people. And that's how I got through it, really was, yeah, you cracked open the XP book, but what else is there? That doesn't mean that we have to do it that way. So let's explore all possibilities. So that's really always been my approach, is exploring more possibilities with more people and just trying to understand their points of view.
So humility to some degree, right? That you don't know everything, that nobody has all the answers.
I don't know if anyone's ever called me humble, but yeah.
Well, we have to be a little bit open, right? We have to know that other people have things to offer and that it's not all in the books already. It's well, what about you, Melissa? Any perspectives there from how you overcame some of your hurdles in the early part of your career?
Yeah, it might not be that early, but I think as the USPTO has taken on this project to product journey, I've had the amazing opportunity to get involved and help lead some of that. I think on a personal note, before I really got involved in this and started working for my now boss, I didn't do any public speaking. So I kind of just said no to any sort of public speaking. And now that, kind of leading the transformation, I do, quite a bit of it internally, talking about our transformation, helping people, presenting in different forums. So just on a personal note, that's been a journey for me. And then I think one of the other things, in terms of the evangelizing it, would be shifting from compliance to enablement. When I first started in my position, it was a little bit more, you need to follow these set of, basic Agile rules, and if you don't, the Agile police are come and, have you do things differently. And I think even to Claire's point, seeking to understand, being that compliance focused wasn't helping us make progress in the Agile space. And so we, my team of coaches and leadership, we do focus now a lot more on enablement and just helping teams get better, listening more, and helping teams understand the why. We're not just doing this because you have to have a daily stand-up. the why in all of this is really important.
Very much so. Very much so. Getting to the heart of agility. And we're just in our last few minutes here, but of course, over to you, Josh, maybe for some closing thoughts on this same topic.
Yeah, I'll give two real quick. The first one was that I very much was very like I loved working with the contractors and with the coaches that I had and everyone, but we also got lots of questions coming in from different agencies and different groups, and I created a federal Agile Birds of a Feather that was only feds. And being able to have that conversation where you don't have to worry about, oh, is this contractor or that contractor getting an advantage, or am I listening to, like, just the Fed conversation was really helpful across that group. And we had folks from all over it expanded. We had folks from all over the different federal agencies. The other one for me personally, very early, like I think within 6 months of starting, I got pulled in to do a evaluation of a procurement, and it was a pain. It was a lot of pain, and we actually did a value stream map of not just how long does it take to get IT out, but how long does it take to get IT out from idea, and procurement was the huge chunk of time. And so it was rolling up my sleeves, really digging in to learn to work with the procurement folks at USCIS to figure out what we could do to get procurement down to fast, like less than 3 months from idea to team on the ground working. And actually our procurement team, in my opinion, became one of the most innovative and agile groups that we had at USCIS and have continued to be so. A lot of the DHS Procurement Innovation Lab is based on the stuff that USCIS did at the beginning to try and drive that. So finding where the issue is and saying, great, I don't know it. Kind of like Claire said, that curiosity, I don't know it. Let me roll up my sleeves to help and lean on the experts there to actually, like, I'll provide the things that I know so that we can grow, and then we'll also, bring in the experts so that they can grow and we can make this faster and more efficient.
I remember this story well. Yeah, having people send in little YouTube videos talking about how they were good, and had kind of several phases of it, and then they would come in for an on-site demonstration, and
Yes.
It's being clever, right? Being open-minded and finding novel ways to approach the problems that they were experiencing. You would not read about that in any Agile book for sure, or maybe you would now that we've got a story from it.
Yes.
So I think, I just want to say a warm thank you to all of you for joining us and sharing your wisdom. I've heard some wonderful strides being made. Many people look at the government as maybe a very difficult place, but we've heard incredible things happening there. And likewise, of course, on the commercial side, which is both leading in some respects and probably maybe following the government nowadays, even in a few others. So certainly a fascinating joint growth that we've seen. And with that, perhaps back over to you, Matthias.
Yes. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating in this. It was, I did not want this to end. It's just such an amazing moment, and I was reveling in it. I'm sure the entire audience was. I will never forget this. Absolutely. That just your minds coming together and just sharing this moment and offering your thoughts. I'm so glad we recorded this, and we'll always have this to share and reflect back upon. So thank you all so much for joining. The conference is certainly not over. We do have a break now. We'll give you a 15-minute break. We'll start with our social hour until 5 o'clock. There's many activities to do. Check Whova, check the community page in Whova. George Dinwiddie has a fishbowl session to just talk about Agile estimation. He is the one to talk to when it comes to estimation.
Yes, he is.
He's got a fishbowl session starting at 4:15. Feel free to join that. Lots of other things you can do. Check the community page. There's discussions you can join. Take some time to explore that. And then at 5 o'clock, we're going to have a raffle prize session. We'll be giving away some prizes. We'll be doing some closing remarks. Please join that. It's going to be a fun time. So thank you all for joining. Thank you to our panel. Great job. And we will now end this session. Thank you. And thank you to our great facilitator, Arlen.
Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Arlen.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.